Barbara Pavarnik. I'm a peace activist with Veterans for Peace, and I'm associated with the Hartford Catholic Worker. And so today we welcome Jim Brazil, coordinator of Veterans for Peace, Chapter 42 in Connecticut, Matt Southworth, Quaker Peace activist, Board of Directors for 2 years, Connecticut for Veterans for Peace, and Bridget Moix from the Quakers Friends Committee on National Legislation. Glad everyone's here. So maybe, Jim, we could start with talking about the mission of Veterans for Peace in Connecticut, and then Matt could talk about it nationally and globally.
Sure. Okay. We have 3 chapters in Connecticut. Our goal is to be active and show the true cost of war by getting out in the community and having activism and what we need to do to make people aware and educate them on the true cost of war and what we could do in the future to avoid the next war. Now, Veterans for Peace has 3 chapters, but nationally, it's international.
Okay.
And I just found out that this guy here, Matt, lived a mile from me about 6 months ago. And it was very exciting to know that there's not only another Veterans for Peace member that's working to educate people on the true cost of war, but he's much younger. So what we're doing with these shows is trying to kind of pass the ball off to some of these guys, because originally Veterans for Peace was originated in 1985 by Vietnam veterans and Korean veterans.
Okay.
Now the Korean veterans, the World War II veterans are getting kind of old. The Veterans for Peace guys might be getting a little tired, but not yet. But we'd like the Iraq era veterans to step up. But Matt is also on the Veterans for Peace Board of Directors.
That's right, the National Board of Directors. And VFP nationally, internationally, we're a group of veterans and associate members who raise the conscience of the country by calling out war for the atrocity that it is. We're Veterans for Peace because we've seen war, we've seen people go through war, we know what the results are, we know how detrimental it is to communities and to our own shared humanity, and that's why we as veterans have decided to take the same commitment we had to the military and apply that to peace, and that is Veterans for Peace.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, such important work, and you know, we come here this afternoon, all of us, despite what's going on in the world, and in the midst of what's going on, that our message is peace is possible. Mm-hmm. That's our hope, that's our belief, and that's how we go forward. So, Jim, the latest project you've been involved in, Basket Project from Massachusetts. Someone was telling you about this basket, and can you share more about it?
Sure.
The Afghan, Iraq, American
right here is
casualties.
the basket here. And inside this basket, you want to hold it?
I'll hold it so you can see it.
Are 6,000 to 7,000 names of the American soldiers that were killed in the Iraq-Afghanistan wars. Let me get the information correctly. This was started by a service held in the North Congregational Church in New Hartford by members of the Winstead Area Peace Action Committee in 2012. And I contacted a Francis Mulder, who told me that there was a Barbara Brownstein and a Joanne Haasmeister who really was interested in making people aware of the true cost of war and having kind of a visual there to do it. So there's 6,000 to 7,000 names that they cut out each week as this went by, these wars went on. I shared this at the stand down. At the VA stand down in Rocky Hill 3 weeks ago.
Can you just say what that was, Jim, the standout for people that don't know?
The Connecticut VA administration has a stand down in which they invite a number of veterans for free services that day. So Veterans for Peace thought it would be a good idea to table and pass out information there on what we actually do. Some of the things we passed out to the veterans was the Save Our VA project.
Okay.
The homeless veterans.
I'm just going to put this down back
Yep.
here. Okay.
Project, Veterans for Inner Peace. We had a project there, and deported veterans. Okay. what I shared was, when the people came and looked at this basket, was if you took 2 other baskets the same size, and you filled them up the same way with 1-inch type of cards, that would fill the number of soldiers that died from suicide during the same era that the Iraq and Afghanistan wars were taking place. But I was wrong. It's 4 times. So I would need 4 baskets to fill the need for these veterans that have committed suicide during that same time. So what we're trying to do is give a visual to people and have them think about the true cost of war. Not only the guys that are killed over there, but the ones that suffer from war when they come back home.
Yeah, really amazing effort. And I'm just being sure, every one of these cards has a photo of one soldier who was killed. And how many are in that basket again, Jim?
6,000 to 7,000.
7,000 in this basket with the photograph. So these are the people that we're honoring. These are the people who suffered. These are the people we take our names forward.
So, and just one last thing, 4 baskets would, that same size with the same amount, would have the number of soldiers that died from suicide in the United States military at that same time. According to information we have, now we also recognize that there's civilian deaths. And if we were to get the baskets and fill them the same way, we would need 495 baskets to fill the amount of civilians in Iraq and Afghanistan that died. So that's the true cost of war, which us as Americans maybe don't think about that much.
These are brothers and sisters.
Sure, yeah. Okay.
So Matt, what was your experience of war? I know you served in Iraq.
Yeah.
And maybe some personal stories of how the military affected your life,
Sure.
your journey.
I'd be happy to share. Yes, I was in northern Iraq, Mosul, Tal Afar in 2004. I was a part of the second wave after President Bush declared mission accomplished, and it was our job to go into Iraq and set up a government for the Iraqi people, a democracy. And what we did instead was we enforced the rule of occupation on the Iraqi people. I saw with my own eyes a population radicalize against our presence, and it became unbearable for me when I realized I would have been acting no different if I were a young Iraqi man instead of a young American man sent by my country under false pretense to invade another. So I also want to mention, you know, I lost 2 friends in combat in 2004, but I've lost 6 to suicide since, and I've known at least another dozen or more people I don't know, but I know indirectly. I know people who know them who've also died by suicide. It's an epidemic, and as I said the last time I was on the Peace Show, it's my strong belief that that epidemic and suicide actually results from moral injury. People who can't square their notions about what they were doing, the idea that they were on the good side, with the fact that we are actually doing really awful things to a population of people that had nothing to do with 9/11, that had nothing to do with Saddam Hussein's, you know, alleged weapons of mass destruction, etc. So that was a little bit about my experience in Iraq.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, it's important to know history, right? So history is ongoing, and the suffering that you were relating to is suffering that we're experiencing now. I know one of my students several years ago, a senior, was looking on his future, and college was beyond what he could afford. I was his counselor and provided him with several options, but when the military came and offered him $100,000 4 years to enter, and they would come in the morning, good people trying to do their jobs with Dunkin' Donuts and coffee.
Yeah. The exact same thing happened to me, by the way, when I was in high school. Yeah. I wanted to go to college. I got a half scholarship to wrestle in Iowa, and I went back and told my parents I got a half scholarship. They said, "We're so proud of you. What's the other half?" And it was $25,000 a year, and they said, "Well, that's really great. You were so proud of your accomplishment, but there's no way we could afford to do that." and I sought, the military path instead because they guaranteed paying for college. And so a lot of young people, I call that I don't call that, many people call that the economic draft. A lot of people are sort of drafted into the service because they have so few other viable economic options in their lives.
So true, and especially for our young men and women of color.
Absolutely.
It's such an injustice when we talk about what we can afford and why we can afford and not afford an education. So I wanted to say a year after my young student entered, he was blown up by a roadside bomb in Iraq. During the eulogy, the parents asked me to speak because it was such a distraught time for the family. I spoke of his love of his friends, of course, his family and music, things that all young people, things that we love, right? Things that make our life interesting and exciting. That's what he valued. I joined Veterans for Peace to remember him. Also, my father-in-law was Second Day Normandy. He was obviously never the same again. Didn't hold a job for years and suffered. And I actually realized 2 weeks ago when I was looking at old obituary, and the family never mentioned this, and he had never really talked about the war except to me when he said he would never fight again. He could never look another soldier in the eye again. But he never spoke to my husband, his son, ever. And 2 weeks ago, I found out that he was at the Battle of Saint Lô in France, one of the most bloody battles in the war. And he won the Bronze Star. But he never talked about getting a star or wanting some accolade for what happened. So that's why I'm in Veterans for Peace. So let us now, maybe we can have a moment of silence to remember all who are suffering from violence, the veterans, of course, and military, and the civilians, and all the casualties, the children around the world. So thank you. So Bridget, can you talk about your work with the Friends Committee, the national legislation, how you got involved, what the work is about, what we can be doing to support the Quakers and their role?
Sure, thank you so much. And I just want to first say what an honor it is to be at this table with you all. I'm the daughter of a veteran and also a minister, and my mom was a former nun, so lots of Catholic connections and various connections here at this table, and just an honor to be part of this intergenerational discussion. And Matt and I go back, and we worked together at Friends Committee on National Legislation some years ago. So FCNL is a Quaker lobbying organization, and we are celebrating 80 years this year. It was the first registered religious lobby organization, set up, if you can imagine, in the midst of World War II in 1943, wow, to be a voice for peace on Capitol Hill. Quakers felt at that time, and continue to feel, that putting our faith into action by engaging our policymakers, and particularly our members of Congress, with our beliefs in peace, justice, sustainability for our earth, is a vital part of how we live our faith. And we engage many people across the country. We work with a network of advocacy teams and advocates that spans all states of our country, and really builds power for a movement, not just Quakers, but many, many other people, to bring these voices into the halls of Capitol Hill. So we advocate on these issues. We're deeply involved right now in advocacy around a ceasefire in the Middle East. Our hearts are breaking every day for the violence underway in Israel and Gaza, and we're very focused on calling on our members of Congress to speak out for a ceasefire.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe talking to what Bridget just shared with us, you've been to Iraq. I'm sorry, you've been to Palestine and Israel, I think,
Yeah.
2 times.
Yeah, all the
Or-
places, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
Iraq, Israel, Palestine. Yeah, I went in 2007 and 2009. I would say in 2007 there was a lot more hope of the prospects for peace than there is now, obviously, with the ongoing violence in both the West Bank and in Gaza. It's just really catastrophic. And what I see is a lot of young people in Gaza especially, who are frankly being brutalized by bombs and weapons of war that vastly outmatch anything that they themselves or any fighting force that could represent them could muster. And it's hard to look at that and see anything other than an atrocity. And when I look and I see those young people in the streets of Gaza, I'm taken right back to Mosul. I'm taken right back. I've had a Marine Corps friend of mine say Fallujah, seeing the concrete rubble, the dismembered bodies. I mean, as tragic and horrific as that is, it's the exact same violence we wrought on the Iraqi people. And what comes to my mind is that peace is not possible through war. Even pacification is not possible through war. The estimated strength force of Hamas fighters is around 30,000. They're below ground in over 300 miles of tunnels, and they are beneath 2.2 million people, civilians, 2.3 million civilians. That is not the recipe for a war that leads to prosperity or that leads to safety or security for Israel or for the Palestinians. That's the recipe for an intractable conflict that could potentially last generations. And so what is the end game of Israel? If Israel wants safety and security, it needs to stop bombing today, now. It should have stopped bombing yesterday. There is no military solution to the political issues that the Israelis and the Palestinians face. There are only agreements and work toward peace can resolve those issues. And I'm not blind to the fact that this is a very long-running conflict. I know the history of the pogroms in Russia and in Ukraine and other places throughout the 19th century. I know the history of World War II and settler colonialism and all of the things that followed that. I understand this is a really challenging problem. However, there's no military solution, so stop the bombing, ceasefire today.
Yeah, I think being a witness, Matt, 3 places right now that just bring us to grief and tears. And I don't even say thank you for sharing. It was hard to hear your sharing, but we're glad you're here, of course. We talked more about war as an instrument of our national policy. There's the phrase called militarization of war, the economic costs, nuclear costs of proliferation. Can you speak maybe a little bit to that, Bridget?
Sure, yes. I mean, if you look at our foreign policy, it is entirely militarized. This is how we relate to the world. And it's only gotten worse, certainly since 9/11 and the global war on terror. And it's also seeping into our domestic policy as well, the militarization of our police. So this is unfortunately a big way in which U.S. policy is shaped. I just want to say that, I don't think anyone hates war and yearns for peace more than the people who experience it. That's veterans, that's civilians. In Gaza right now, that's over 4,000 children who've been killed from these bombings.
I would add too, of course, the victims in Israel as well.
Absolutely.
So, of course, the atrocity and what happened unannounced.
Absolutely.
And a lifetime, a generational lifetime for people that have been tragically annihilated.
Yes,
and
1,400 lives lost in the October 7th attack, thousands more taken hostage. And I was at a vigil last night in front of the White House with the Jewish community who were standing up for peace and justice for all people in Israel and Palestine and saying an end to the violence against civilians in Israel, against civilians in Gaza. The war is now spreading, so the militarization, as you say, is spreading to the border of Lebanon. There's real risks that this war could expand even further and engulf the region. And so just to underline what Matt was saying about the urgent need for a ceasefire now, we can't emphasize that enough. And members of Congress are beginning to call on this. There is a letter by a number of members in the House. Senator Durbin has stepped up and called for a ceasefire. I know that Senator Murphy has made some sounds about ending the war, very important. I hope the other Connecticut members of Congress will also speak up for a ceasefire. But we need much more pressure from our policymakers and much more courage, I would say, from our policymakers to stand up for an end to the violence and a ceasefire on both sides so that we can get beyond this war and back to a pathway towards peace.
Yeah.
Can I put a fine point on that too?
Please.
Just the military presence that is mounting, the U.S. and our ally military presence is mounting in the region is terrifying. The Gulf of Tonkin incident kicked off the war in Vietnam or forced us to involve ourselves even further in the war in Vietnam. It wouldn't take very much to set this off into a much larger regional or even global war. And that's the scary thing. It would be nuclear. You know, Israel has nuclear weapons. It's an unacknowledged program. You know, there are other nations that might have interest in being involved in a more global war that involves the West as well. So we're really flirting here. We're really on the edge of something much more catastrophic, and we need to pay very close attention to that. And to Bridget's point, we need our members of Congress, our elected leaders, to stand up and put an end to the bombing and the violence now
a
if we
ceasefire,
have
yeah.
any hope of curbing the larger regional and possibly global war.
And the tragic thing is, really, this is an example of you get what you pay for. Our government has been funding war in the Middle East and around the world at the level of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars every year. Over $800 billion in the Pentagon budget this past year. And it's going to rise even more now with these wars. Look at what we invest in peace. What do we invest in peace building and in bringing the real safety and security that people need in their lives? The basics of education, housing, healthcare, conflict resolution and transformation with people who are in conflict. We spend pennies on that compared to the billions that we pour into war.
And I think also, I mean, that's exactly why we need citizens to step forward, right? So when we know that the Congress people who represent us are making choices that are affecting lives, ending lives, then we, as we're watching here and sharing with our families and our friends, need to ask ourselves, of course, what can we do? We can write, we can stand with people of peace. We could stand when people are having rallies. We can talk about the rallies if we can't go. We can have discussions, you know, with our family and friends about what our consciences tell us, what the effects of our choices are. I know a favorite of Jim and I, Thich Nhat Hanh, and I met him or was with him years ago. He's a Buddhist speaker, a writer, international peace activist. He said, and I know my father-in-law would definitely resonate with this, you know, when you begin to see your enemy is suffering as we suffer, that's the beginning of making choices. That's the beginning of insight. When we see that we're all suffering. So we're looking forward to working more with young people and getting discussions going in this direction. So Jim has been involved with Central Connecticut State University students by speaking, being invited to speak in a classroom. And I thought maybe you could share the question of the student.
Yeah, like Bridget and her organization gives an active way of getting involved politically. Veterans for Peace in Connecticut, you know, and you don't have to be a veteran to be a member of Veterans for Peace, especially, or any of our chapters, but in Connecticut, yes, we'd like people to get involved and reach out to the community, to your family and friends, and get involved. Most recently, Fred Lewis, Bill Potvin, and I went to Professor Juan Coronado's Vietnam War class, and we presented our experience before and after the Vietnam War. And there was 24 kids there, all history majors. And I gave them a copy of, well, I being a middle school teacher, I said, I'm going to have a raffle. I gave them all numbers at the beginning. And, okay, who knows about Martin Luther King's Beyond Vietnam speech? Well, none of these history majors, not one, ever heard of the Beyond Vietnam speech, which Veterans for Peace has adopted as kind of a Bible as to what nonviolence should be.
And it is the year to the day that he was assassinated,
Yeah.
that he made that speech.
Right, he made it, I forgot the particular day, but 1 year later he was assassinated because of it. And he says a country that spends more on the military than it does on social issues is approaching spiritual death. This was 60 years ago, and we have to be kind of introspective to see if we've actually gotten to this point.
Yeah, to the point that you made, Bridget.
And
what are we spending our money on?
so I
Yeah.
gave out 4 or 5 copies of this. I gave out 4 or 5 copies of our Veterans for Peace newsletter, which if you do join Veterans for Peace, you get 3 of these each year. And a shout out to my brother, who is just a new member of Veterans for Peace. He was in the Air Force in 1955 to 59, a little older than me, but you know, I'm very happy to have somebody in the family, part of Veterans for Peace. I also raffled off John Kennedy's Peace Speech book. And I asked the class, does anybody know what this quote is from? And this is, actually John Kennedy said this in his peace speech. And if you could envision Biden saying this or any government leader, let me know. But he said, what kind of peace do we seek? Not a Pax Americana enforced on the world by American weapons of war, not the peace of the grave or security of the slave. I am talking about genuine peace, the peace that makes life on earth worth living, the kind that enables men and nations to grow and to hope for a better future and life for their children. Not merely peace for Americans, but peace for all men and women. Not merely peace in our time, but peace for all time. Yes, that's peace, all right. And I gave out a copy of the book for one of the students, Andrew, that recognized that. So.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I know we're kind of nearing the end of our program. So thanks everybody for being here. And I wanted to just end quickly about a couple of quotes. Mother Teresa, if we have no peace, it's because we have forgotten that we belong to one another, that we are all related on a spiritual level and economic level. That's what we're hoping for. And to nurture our own inner peace, as Dorothy Day said, founder of the Catholic Worker, we plant seeds that will flower as a result of the choices and about our lives. So we are the seeds that are going forward. And seeds are important. They're essential to where we're going with peace. So let's do some peace practice, appreciate every breath we take. And I know what's difficult for me when I wake up in the morning, something hard, is to sit still, maybe for 5 minutes, if possible, and relax, right? So we can come from a place of quietness as we go forward into action. To go out in nature, it's a beautiful time of year, despite everything that's going on, to realize what we've been given as gift. We're all alone at times. Loneliness is an epidemic worldwide. To notice people, to reach out, to be grateful, to pray, and to forgive. So consider joining Veterans for Peace and Hope Out Loud. It's a neighborhood organization here, actually in Hartford, a city organization at the Quaker Meeting House in West Hartford. And we're very grateful to Bridget, to Matt, and to Jim. Thank you all for being with us.
And thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.